Hi, and welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha. I'm Nancy Anderson Dolan from Wise Heart Wellness, and I'm so happy to see you here tonight, whether you're here with me live or whether you're watching this later. We're going to talk about pause tonight. And the people that are live with me, we're talking about taking pauses today. And it's a lovely, lovely idea, but most of us don't do it very often. And it's not like it's this new age thing. And there's lots of stuff running around on the internet about different kinds of pauses and like it's this revolutionary idea, but it's really an archaic term, a very, very old term from our ancient civilizations. And it was meant to stop doing something, an interruption or a suspension of something that time. But now it's more like, okay, I'm going to take a break and that kind of thing. But also historically it has been a spiritual tradition in many cultures, so it goes back a long, long ways. Like indigenous cultures would often do a vision quest. They would take a pause from normal life and go off and do a vision quest. And of course, like in Buddhist literature and ideology, there's a lot about stepping aside from the world and settling into yourself and taking that pause from the everyday life to be present in it more when you return. And so that practice, oh, and of course, Mother Teresa too. Mother Teresa had a plan, literally, an actual plan to stop, to pause for a sacred presence moment 5 times a day. And that's like, it seems crazy, but can you imagine if we actually stopped 5 times a day and went, hmm, how am I doing? Am I centered? Am I living intentionally? Am I living consciously? What do I want to be doing in this moment? How do I want to be in the world for this moment? It would be life-changing. And so this idea about it, like the next part is like, what do you do on the pause, basically? And there's another Christian organization that talks about find the power in accepting, understanding your soul and emotions. And it's like, oh, that just seems pretty useful, actually. But there's a few words there we don't know about. And so we don't necessarily settle down to it that quickly, especially in this sort of urgent kind of culture we live in. There's so much about achievement and those kinds of things. And not just achieving, but getting it sooner. You might have noticed there was this explosion of things in starting in the 12 steps did it before everybody else, and they were back in the 30s. But the idea of like 5 minutes to better relationships, or 10 steps to overcome anxiety, and all of those things. And it's not a bad idea, but it is this idea of we have to have things right now, and we have to keep going, and just be around the bend there's going to be this next thing. And often when we do get organized, we get things all settled and organized, and then we think, oh, but I should really clean out my car, or I haven't written back to that person that emailed me. And then, so we don't reward ourselves when we do settle into things. We don't take a real pause and go, oh, everything is perfect in this moment, and I am just fine. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to have that idea when we have this list in the back of our heads, whether it's a list of, shortcomings that we have, or a list of to-dos that I need to take care of. And some people say, but I'm a mom, or I'm a head of a corporation, or I'm an actor or a performer or an athlete, and I have to stay ahead of everybody else. Really, that's not how the world works. It may look like that on the outside, but of so many of the people I know that are truly successful in the idea of doing something they want to be doing, having some sense of flow in their life, and they are moving in a pace that is right for them. They slow things down more often than they speed them up. They take those pauses, And they don't take it in a fearful way, like, what if I miss something while I'm taking my pause? They just jump in and they go, okay, time to settle down and recenter. So this idea of it, I really want to encourage people to keep an open mind about what the pause might look like for you, because it will be different from person to person. And so we really, this is an antidote actually to current life, because we want to find out for us what is important. I'm going to give you a little biology about it because I love the science. It's so important to bring our brains back out of survival mode, even for just moments at a time. Because when we live in chronic survival mode, which just means we're worrying about this, or we're rushing, or we feel that urgency, that was great when we were running away from tigers. But if I think that I have to get to the grocery store and get that head of lettuce that is on sale this week because it's $95.50 otherwise, it creates a lot of stress, and it flips us into this survival mode. When we're in survival mode, we can't even imagine the idea of a pause. In survival mode, our brain has to go really quick and find a solution really, really fast. And there's a diagram in the email that went out this week, and it talks about the different levels of mind, and the survival brain being really down at the bottom, that instinctual, just don't die kind of thing. And it's great to not die, but rarely do we need that kind of urgency. And if we can do it, take a pause, and our brain starts coming back up. I use the hand model of the brain a lot. Down here, your lower wrist here is the brain stem, and that's where the survival brain really is. It keeps us breathing, it keeps us, moving and getting out of harm's way, which is great, but it's not any good for actually moving forward in the world because it's short term. This part of our brain doesn't have a lot of extra storage for the long-term goals we might have. And then the emotional part of it, you fold your thumb over like this. This is the limbic brain. And you get a little more connection when you're come up from the survival brain into that, but still you don't have this prefrontal cortex that has all the important information about thinking about wanting to do something, being able to figure it out, and soothing this brain down here so you're not afraid to do it. And so if you take the pause, literally what happens is you start going like this and your brain comes back online. And that changes everything in your body. Changes your digestion, changes how you're going to sleep, changes how your body wants to move. When we're in that survival idea, our body's very tense, and it can even hurt to move around. And when we're in that pause moment, we can sort of flow, and we can go for a run as a pause and enjoy it and relax and be energized by it. If you run in survival mode, like, I have to lose weight, or I have to do this amount of running today because that will make a difference in my life, it's going to make me happy. It actually doesn't, because there's that survival mode sort of feel to it. So this idea about pausing, you hear me talk about relaxing all the time. That is one of the big things. We get to take a pause and calm our bodies first. Take a breath. That starts to bring our brain back into coherence. And then we can start to have a little wider vision. Survival brain goes like this, like, okay, are there any predators that might eat me right in front of me? And they don't really look back here as like, is there a really nice piece of fruit on that wild tree that I could sit down and have? So that sort of idea about opening your brain really helps people to think about taking a pause. Because if I'm rushing forward all the time, my scope gets narrow. If I'm taking my pauses, I get back and I have a nice view again, a good wide view. So this is not a practice that you do once a year, like at New Year's, where you take time to decide how you want the year to be. because your brain forgets those things too fast. And if I can train my brain to pause when I start to get anxious, I can actually stay out of that survival mode unless a bus is going to run me over this moment. And it works like it should work. So this idea about first taking a pause, I truly have to sell it to people like, yes, it's really a good thing. It has all these benefits and features. You'll love it when you get it home, because people are really afraid of pausing. And so what we do instead is we withdraw. But withdrawing is not the same thing as pausing. Withdrawing is often done in overwhelm and fear. If we can go, okay, I feel that overwhelm, but take the pause, that means I'm not going to worry about the next 5 minutes. I'm just going to take this, open up, and we reprogram our brains that way. If you paused like Mother Teresa 5 times a day, and not for a huge amount of time, it could just even be a moment sometimes, you could actually start to rebuild the structure of your brain, where more blood flow would be going to the executive functioning, this nice one on top that really can help you move where you want to, and less to the lower parts of the brain that get fired up if we're in danger. So this idea about it, part of what allows us to take a pause is getting in a routine of taking pauses. So once we've sold ourselves on the idea of a pause, it's about building some routine in. And I was just thinking, do I really want to disclose that very personal information? And I just took a pause to reconsider, but I'm going to. So, and one of the first times I pause is in the morning when I go to the washroom, because I've set it up so that I have a daily reader book there. And so I just take that moment before I step out of my room and get sort of sucked into the flow of things to really take a pause and reorient. And actually, that's not true. I actually take a pause before I get out of bed, because I listen to a meditation before I get out of bed to open up and sort myself out for the day, and sort of imagine how the day's going to go, or imagine how I'm going to go in the day is a better description. But it really is that pause before my feet swing out of the bed and hit the floor running. And so it's really useful to just, like, those are pauses. It doesn't have to be clear the decks for an hour and don't let anybody talk to me. It can be just moments. And some people go for a lunch walk instead of sitting talking to people, so they get a little space and time. Some people have a little siesta. I think that would be a wonderful thing to adapt to all cultures, because that pause for your brain can be really useful. I'm working with someone that is taking a pause from talking to people, and just a pause, just gonna center in and do that kind of thing for themselves. I'm getting a little interference, so I'm just checking. And sorry, back from that, I want to pause to fix the sound there. So this idea of going along and just taking the pause, so we don't have to jump with the survival brain saying, do something right now. So we were talking earlier about a number of us had been doing a lot of things, and we had decided to take a pause from those things and get a little more clarity. And that's what happens when you take a pause. You take a pause and you go, ah. My famous one is that when I take a pause, I often get a reminder in my brain that my library books are due. And so I can go, oh, great, I can take those back. And if I pause enough, they never get overdue. It's great. But then when I'm deciding to take the pause, whether it's like in the washroom in the morning or before I get out of bed, then it gets livelier during the day. And some people set alarm clocks, and it might just be an alarm clock on, not an actual alarm clock, but an alarm on their phone or their watch or whatever it is they're using, to take a breath. I had a good friend that every hour she had an alarm go off, and she'd stop and she would take a breath. That's a beautiful pause in itself. So think about what you might like to do to create a pause, because it's so important here. We want to get out of that survival mind, but even beyond the prefrontal cortex coming down, we can go beyond that. We can go into the collective unconsciousness around our brains, because we're all connected, and we can go to what we might call a higher self or an inner self or a divine mind, or it's come to be known as wise brain or wise mind. And that is really the sort of apex pause moment where I can get a little guidance from beyond myself. And it might be as simple as, you really should phone that person. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's not the busy survival mind, like, you didn't phone that person and they're going to be mad. It's not like that. It's that little subtle voice that we can sort of feel comfortably in our bodies. When we pause enough, that kind of information, that kind of flow starts up, and lovely synchronicities start to happen more. We happen to get a phone call that we've been meaning to phone them, or something happens and we have a new opportunity that we really love and we hadn't even thought about because we were busy planning and pushing so many other agendas. But this pause in our life opens up space for that, for life to unfold as it can in front of us, rather than with us having a stranglehold on it. So that the activation of that part of the brain and the shift is really important to remember as well, because it's a deliberate pause. So if you happen to get a quiet moment, if you get somewhere early to pick up kids, or you have show up for an appointment and they tell you it's on a different day and you have other kind of pause, that doesn't feed the brain as much as deliberate pauses do. So that's why this idea of getting a routine of taking deliberate pauses, not when you're so burned out you can't do anything but really saying, okay, so if you're an accountant, when tax season is done, if you're a mom, when the kids are in bed, if you're, traveling a lot, planning a pause when you get back. All sorts of practical kinds of things like that, where you can work with the ebb and flow of your life. And what you do in the pause, like I say, if you put your feet up or get a cup of tea, or, say prayers, or consider some planning, or even like dancing. Dancing is a pause for some people. They move into that, they move into their body. And you'll hear all sorts of things. And you can follow it and find out what that particular pause has for you. That moves us out of this idea of urgency and scarcity and thinking we have to figure everything out. And so this doesn't mean we don't look into things and consider things. We do. And we take a pause to step back from it all and let information and ideas and feelings come to us. And it's brilliant for feelings, because a lot of the time we push away our feelings and we don't make room for them. And so when we pause, often the feelings come up. But if we pause frequently enough, those feelings come up and move through, and we don't have to struggle with them or stuff them back down. And so we want that kind of thing. Every time that you shift like that, your body and brain will look forward more to those kinds of pauses and be able to tolerate more, because they know that pause is coming. Okay, our body is so sensitive to our ideas. What we're thinking impacts our bodies. And so if we're thinking, yes, I have a lot to do this morning, this afternoon, I get to pause, it will settle down and go through what needs to happen. If we are constantly pushing ourselves to the breaking point, we don't feel that hope of a pause coming. And we can get sort of more tense, more withdrawn, more survival brain is just to try and get through whatever is coming next. So the idea of planning the pause. You're actually telling yourself that it's okay, sweetie. You don't have to suck it up and get into survival mode, because we are going to pause here. And it's so different, like Mother Teresa's plans about a sacred pause. Because if we only pause when we're up against the wall and scared, we don't get as good an outcome as when we are making practical, frequent, planned pauses. That deliberate pause that delivers much better brain health. And I think a last note here, yeah, so I put it in the email as well. There are unplanned pauses if you're not paying attention to the universe. The universe will help you. They will give you pauses. And like it did with me, breaking both my legs this year, it was a longer pause than I normally take, but it was a really great pause too, because I settled into it. The very first night with the very first broken leg, or the very first morning, I guess, after the surgery with it, I was like, when are they going to come and check on me? Why hasn't anybody come to see if I'm okay? And then there was a sunrise, and I was on a higher floor in a hospital, and I could see the sunrise all the way out. And I was like, oh, this is fabulous. Life is good. The sun came up again. And all the other thoughts just sort of left. There was no urgency about, can somebody come and tell me what's going on? It was just like, I can just pause until somebody comes and lets me know what's next, because I'm not in control of it. I don't need to be. I can just be present. And it was just a very graceful thing. And I don't know if I would have been as graceful if I knew it was going to be a whole year of that kind of event, but I take the unplanned pauses as gracefully as I can and work with them, because we've had a lot of them in the last while, like the idea of COVID, and we all got a pause on that we didn't necessarily ask for. And those kinds of things, we can use those practices of pausing in those moments as well. And I really find out the way that people pause when I talk to them. And people think it's like, oh, it's so graceful. I sit and I get zen and it's a wonderful pause. That's not generally how it starts for me. For me, it involves a lot of whining, carrying on, and lamenting things, like the imaginary future that I thought I would get if things went a particular way. And then, releasing all that energy, however you do it, stomping around the room, whining to God, whatever, then it creates some space and you can do the other things. And in the email, I've listed more things, but I'm not going to go through them again today. But I will say that if you would like to be on our email list, someone pointed out to me, I don't announce this verbally in the videos. If you would like to be on the email list to receive the email with the written content as well about what we're going to talk about, and the notification of topics and that, you can send an email to scientistsage@gmail.com, and we will get you into the mailing list. So I think that that's what I'm going to do and wrap up. And what I do also in the email is put in some ideas about routes you can take to learn whatever we're talking about. So that's in that email as well, if you'd like to find out more. Okay, and we're going to take a breath, and we're just going to do a brief little meditation. So if you're with me live, feel free to go off camera if you want, put your feet up, and just take a pause and take a deep breath. Just breathing into your whole body. The body loves the pause because we tend to breathe a little deeper. We're not shortchanging it. And then relax your body in whatever way feels good to you. You might close your eyes, you might put your feet up, you might get a blanket. But just imagine that you can really stop time. And in this moment, the flow of life just brings what you need. There's no effort involved. Whether it's the thoughts that you need, maybe a shift in thinking is sort of pointed out to you, or whether you just need the mental rest of no thoughts at all. Or the body rest of really letting go of any clenching. I tell people to check their shoulders often, hunch them up and let them drop. I often find my shoulders way high up. And I pause and they just relax. And you may be pausing to just review, what do I want to be doing next? What's my emotional state right now? Is there anything I just need to release? Or do I just need to be quiet for a few minutes? You can open up to the nudges of the universe. You might find you get some directions for post-pause or to extend your pause, like go outside and sit in the sun, or get a nice cool glass of water, warm cup of tea. And if you're doing a pause like this at home, it can be really useful to have specific kinds of openings, like maybe shutting off all media or going and sitting in a particular chair, or imagining a place in your mind that you're going to. And then as you come to the end of a pause, just to open up to all that energy flowing through your body freely again. You've let go of clenches, let go of rules in your brain, crazy ideas your mind might have talked you into earlier in the day. And just let that energy flow through you and carry you back to whatever you're going to next. Whether that's going to sleep or going back to face the world. Consciously and deliberately gather that energy from your pause and move forward in a more relaxed, conscious manner. To go out and be able to enjoy whatever's coming next. Okay. To the people that are watching this later, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll close with, I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.